A sickly daughter is just a waste and of no use. I don't need such a child. You're a childless couple, so it's perfect for you, right? Be grateful to your sister. My sister came to our house and said that to me. Did the poor niece, who seemed to realize she was being abandoned by her mother, look like she was about to cry. Ever since she was born, my sister, who was allowed to do whatever she wanted, remained mentally a 3-year-old, even after becoming an adult, getting married, and having a child. Eventually, tired of my sister's whims, her husband abandoned her and she returned to our parents' home. Now she's trying to remarry and is dumping her daughter on me because she's in the way. 11 years later, my sister, who had remarried a company president and was strutting around as the president's wife, came back to me. She looked nothing like a president's wife, shabby and emitting a foul smell. My sister, who abandoned her daughter, now shamelessly asked for help, but my sister's evil schemes were exposed, leading to even more tragedy for my sister and her husband. I'm a married woman in my late 20s. I have one older sister. My sister was born sickly and grew up believing it was her right to monopolize our parents' love. Our parents, feeling guilty about her frailty, never said no to her whims. It might have been okay until I was born. By the time I was old enough to understand, our house was completely centered around my sister. As I grew up and started asserting myself, our parents always made me give in. Because my sister was sickly and pitiable, it was only natural for me, the healthy one, to endure, they said. I understood that as a child, but I began to question why I always had to endure everything after I started kindergarten, and realized that not everything revolved around my family. Ending my connections beyond my parents and sister, I learned that there were people enduring hardships while living their lives with strength, despite not being sickly like my sister. My sister was beautiful and always indoors, so she was pale. People who didn't know her true nature often said she was like a frail, beautiful girl, and she seemed quite pleased with that. She knew exactly how to gain sympathy and favor from others. At home, she was a selfish princess, but in front of others, she played the role of a caring, considerate sister who endured and persevered. Was unaware of her true nature or easily deceived. Until I went to kindergarten, I never had anything of my own. I never had personal belongings because everything was hand-me-downs from my sister. But in nicer terms, they were my sister's cast-offs, but she hated the idea of her things being passed on to me. So she would deliberately damage or dirty them. Like you're using my cast-offs? How dare you take things from a sickly person like me? That's why I make them unusable. And my sister would dirty or cut them right in front of me. Naturally, my parents noticed the torn clothes, but my sister would cruelly claim that I didn't want her hand-me-downs, and tore them up in front of her. My parents said they wouldn't buy new things for a child who didn't take care of them, so I had to wear those tattered clothes. You should be grateful and wear what your sickly sister gave you with care. A treat when I went out in torn clothes, some neighbors worried if I was being mistreated. When I repeated what my sister told me to say, they would praise me as a good sister-loving child and sometimes mend the torn parts for me. When I started kindergarten, my parents couldn't keep up the pretense and finally bought me clothes, a bag, and other necessities. My sister had never been to kindergarten due to her frailty, so there were no hand-me-downs. I was thrilled to finally have clothes and a bag of my own. But my sister resented that I went to kindergarten and had things she never got. She often took my bag and lunchbox. But to the next day, when I wasn't ready for kindergarten, the already busy mornings became even more hectic and suspicion turned towards her. And then she would coolly claim she saw me put them in a different place, shifting the blame to me. I was scolded harshly by my mother. That's when I realized not only should I not defy my sister, but I also couldn't show off or be happy in front of her. I had to stay quiet and suppress my existence in front of her to avoid her wrath. That's when I realized I had no place in this house. When I was in elementary school, they started to find effective medications for my sister's illness. After trying various ones, she recovered to the point of having a healthy body. She began to attend sports activities, which she often missed before without any difficulty. However, she didn't want to let go of the family life that had always revolved around her. Like the time we went to buy a backpack for me. My sister wanted a new one because she was bored of her current one, saying the old one would be fine for me. My parents thought it was unfair that I was the only one with a hand-me-down when everyone else had brand new backpacks. It was the same with new stationery and clothes. As for clothes, my sister was slim and I had grown more as per my age, so hand-me-downs were no longer practical. And my parents, who had always prioritized my sickly sister, began treating us more equally as she recovered. They used to tell me to endure because my sister was sick, but now they told her to help out as much as she could since she was the older sister. Why do I have to help? What if I do something extra and my illness relapses? The doctor had told us that a relapse was unlikely unless she did excessive exercise. But my sister resisted, throwing things nearby or screaming so loudly that it could be heard by neighbors when our parents didn't listen to her. Eventually, her demands were often met. Interestingly, the screams she made were blamed on my tantrums or selfishness. A team when it became a problem at school and in the neighborhood. Everyone believed it was me causing trouble. They praised my sister for putting up with a difficult younger sibling. I thought to myself, they don't know anything, yet they make such baseless comments. When my sister graduated from elementary school, I was relieved that we wouldn't be in the same school anymore. In middle school, where she had already graduated, I was glad not to be compared to her. I gradually became more involved in the sports team, while she began hanging out with flashy boys from other schools. I continued the sports I started in middle school, through college, and got a job at a local company. My sister, although she went to college, didn't look for a job and just hung around, living off her parents' money. She quickly married a guy she reconnected with from college. Initially, her husband tolerated her whims, saying a little selfishness in a woman was charming. But after she had a child and continued her selfish behavior, he couldn't take it anymore and left when their daughter was 4. I felt he was ready to give up everything just to get away from my sister. Particularly a year before my sister's divorce, I married a coworker who was actually 4 years older than me. Our marriage happened when her marriage was already falling apart. My niece, like my sister in her childhood, was frail. You'd think my sister, having gone through the same, would be understanding and make her daughter the center of her life. But she was different. She would look at my daughter and irritably say, "What's the point of living if she can't do anything normal?" Repeated incidents like these led to their divorce. Probably my sister refused to let her ex-husband take care of their daughter. Isaac marrying me meant my husband suddenly learned all the family drama. I was worried he'd be disgusted and consider divorce. After all, who wants to deal with troublesome in-laws? But he reassured me, saying that while marriage does link families, it's ultimately about the individuals involved. He committed to standing by me and overcoming hardships together. And he's proven it time and again. After my sister's divorce, she took her daughter and moved back home. My husband and I had set up our home near my parents' place. He suggested living near my parents so we could help them if needed. But before my sister got married, she didn't want to live near our parents' house. Although our parents said not to worry about them, deep down, it was still a concern. And yet, to our surprise, she returned home after her divorce. Her selfishness was as strong as ever. Initially, she helped her parents take care of my niece. But gradually, she started leaving her with them more and more, preferring to go out and have fun. I seen my parents did their best not to burden us, even though we lived nearby. But eventually, we found ourselves taking care of my niece more often. I was wary, knowing she was my sister's child. I even briefed my husband about my sister's long history of unreasonable behavior, preparing him for the worst. However, my niece turned out to be a very good kid, unlike her mother. At first, my niece was reserved and seemed scared around us, but she warmed up after spending some time together. It turned out my niece's fear came from my sister yelling at her. My parents also asked us to be understanding. Slowly, my niece began to help around the house and followed our instructions well. I believe her father, my former brother-in-law, must have raised her well. My niece grew up mostly without her mother's love, shuttling between my parents' house and ours until she was 6. Then, one day, my sister showed up at our house with my niece. I'm getting remarried to a company president. He doesn't want a sickly child because they're just money, pits, and bad luck. Take this child for my happiness. I realized my sister's selfishness was kicking in again. When I asked if her parents knew about this, she retorted that it was none of my business. And she insisted I should just do as told. Don't tell her father either. But officially, she's staying with me, and you childless folks are kindly helping out. Let's stick to that story. I was dumbfounded. My niece, who may not have understood everything, clearly knew she was being abandoned by her mother. How pitiful it was that even such a horrible mother meant something to her. If you're going to push her off on us, then we won't just be part-time caretakers for our niece. We will legally adopt her and raise her as our own child, I declared without consulting my husband. That's fine with me, my husband said when I told him what I had in mind. He was also furious at my sister's attitude and agreed with my decision. He added that ultimately it was up to my niece. No way, I thought. If her father finds out, I won't get child support. Remember, don't tell him about the remarriage. My sister warned. What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My sister nonchalantly revealed that she refused to let her ex-husband have custody because she was receiving child support, which she wasn't using for my niece, but for her own leisure. Apparently, even her parents didn't know this. She threatened me not to tell anyone, hoping to continue receiving child support while dumping the actual care on us. I was astounded by her audacity and nonsense. I knew we had to get her to agree to the adoption or my niece would continue to be a pawn in her games. I was determined not to let my niece suffer as I did. As my husband suggested, as long as nobody tells, he won't find out. After threatening us one more time about meddling, my sister left my niece with us and departed. We then asked my niece what she wanted. Despite being only 6, she had her own will. We wanted to respect her feelings as much as possible, and so did my parents. But with tears in her eyes, she decided to become our child. Those tears seemed more like tears of joy than resignation. But to avoid any trouble when my sister returned, we quickly finalized the adoption process with my niece. After that, I tried to contact my sister to inform her, but she had remarried and become unreachable. 8. Now that I'm the president's wife, I don't want you coming to me for money. Goodbye, poor people. Don't contact me ever again. My sister's phone number and email were no longer in use. When I told our parents about this last conversation with her, they were furious to a degree I had never seen before, despite always favoring her in the past. They declared they would cut ties with her and never welcome her back home. However, they didn't need to worry. My sister never contacted them either. Little did we know, cutting off contact with us would lead to an unbelievable turn of events, but that would happen a bit later. We raised my niece with love and sometimes strictness, as if she were our own daughter. She grew up to be a sincere, kind, and well-rounded child. During this time, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. My niece treated him as her real brother and actively participated in his care. Her frail health, a concern since her childhood, improved under the care of my sister's former doctor. By middle school, she had developed physically like her peers and became stronger. The doctor mentioned that environmental factors can contribute to frail health. My sister relegated my sickly niece to the position of a burdensome child and neglected to improve her condition. It might have been why it took so long for my niece to get stronger. As she grew healthier, my niece became more proactive in absorbing various experiences. We encouraged her interests without forcing anything on her. We wanted her to learn that it's sometimes necessary to give up, as not every experience is a waste of time. This perspective might come from my own youth spent in sports, where injuries are common and you have to decide whether to continue or take a different path. I struggled with various concerns, but in the end, it's up to me to make the decision. Ultimately, it's up to the individual to decide and take responsibility for their choices. I asked my niece if she was ready to take responsibility for quitting something midway and if she would have no regrets or blame others for her decisions. She assured us that any decision she made was her own responsibility, so we didn't say anything more. My niece tried various sports, but didn't excel beyond the average level. Though my husband and I are sports enthusiasts, we never pushed our interests on her. She was creative and quick-witted, excelling in her studies and always among the top students. She went to a private high school known for its unique educational approach that focused not only on academics, but also on nurturing each student's individuality. At this school, my niece and a friend became passionate about developing a new product. Initially, they provided their prototype, a groundbreaking new product born from their combined experiences, to hospitals and nursing homes. My niece, though healthier, still had difficulty hearing in one ear and occasionally used a hearing aid. She'd been teased in elementary school for it, and her friend's grandmother refused to wear a hearing aid, calling it unattractive, which led to communication difficulties and family conflicts. That's when they came up with the idea. What if hearing aids were cute or stylish accessories? They began by attaching their designs to existing hearing aids, which unexpectedly gained popularity. A hearing aid company proposed a collaboration, and they decided to start a business as high school entrepreneurs, becoming a local sensation. Their product was featured in the regional newspaper and later introduced on local television. Word of mouth about my niece's business spread, and profits soared. There were even requests for stylish canes, not just hearing aids. My niece managed to balance business and studies, reaching her senior year of high school without neglecting either. It was a fulfilling 3 years for both her and us, her adoptive parents. It had been 11 years since she became our daughter. We hadn't heard from my sister in all this time, so we thought we'd never see her again. Then, out of the blue, my sister contacted us when only my niece was home. My niece answered the phone, not knowing it was her biological mother. Our home phone has settings to block nuisance calls. Since there was no alert, my niece inadvertently answered it. My niece wouldn't say exactly what my sister said, but she expressed a desire to meet my sister. My husband and I were torn. But could it be that despite everything, she still yearned for her biological mother? We debated whether it was right for us to have a say in this. Rick's worrying if it was arrogant of us. Actually, we decided to respect my niece's wishes, but requested to be present if she met her mother. We waited at the designated place and time, and a drastically changed sister appeared. Her hair was dull with streaks of gray. Her face was gaunt and covered in blemishes, and her clothes were ill-fitting and worn. Behind her were her husband and a small child. Look at my luck! Who would have thought my daughter would turn out to be a moneymaker? She said with a hoarse, dry laugh. Apparently, her husband's business had failed. They lost everything, and now lived in a shabby apartment. They were struggling, waiting for discounted meals at supermarkets, when my sister saw my niece on a street TV, now famous as a high school CEL. She had looked up everything about my niece, including her new product developments. It seemed she planned to leech off my niece's company, even contemplating taking it over. Look, this is your brother. You'll be the breadwinner now. Work hard for our sake and let us live comfortably, she said, grabbing my niece's arm as if to take her away. How dare she say such things? She's not your daughter anymore, I thought to myself. I was about to warn her that I'd report it as an abduction if she tried to take her away in front of us, but my niece shouted first. Who are you? I don't know you. Don't call yourself my mother. It's annoying. My parents are these two right here. My real brother is waiting for us at our grandparents' house. My sister became hysterical, screaming about the debt of raising her. Her habit of shrieking when things didn't go her way, even as an adult, was evident. Is it okay to make such a scene here? If you don't back down, I can let your ex-husband hear this, I threatened, pulling out an old voice recorder. It played the conversation from 11 years ago, when she abandoned my niece, including her threats about child support. My sister lunged at me for the recorder, but my husband stepped in to protect us. Did you know that you're still entitled to child support payments, even if you remarry? She seemed unaware that remarrying doesn't stop child support payments. But you know you forfeit your rights when you give up custody, don't you? They won't find out if I don't tell them. The world doesn't work that conveniently. Actually, when we were finalizing the adoption, we met with my niece's biological father, who had asked us to redirect the child support payments to us. But we refused the child support. We wanted my niece to meet her biological father if she ever wished to, and vice versa. I believed it was her biological father who had taught her manners and decency. He was too kind and selfless, always putting my niece's happiness before his own. He conveyed to him that my niece would be saddened if he weren't happy, and he understood. Later, he remarried and had children. My sister, his ex-wife. Ex-wife seemed oblivious to the fact that child support payments had ceased, and at the time of her remarriage, she was living a life of luxury without financial worries. However, after the bankruptcy, she must have realized the missing child support payments. Damn it! It was your doing, wasn't it? She accused. She had noticed the absence of payments but refrained from contacting us, not wanting to reveal her fallen state. It was puzzling why she would leech off my niece while still maintaining some pride. Perhaps she thought her daughter would sympathize and help her out. It's the misuse of child support money didn't seem to be something that could be easily addressed, as my sister was not in a state to make rational decisions. She left hastily with her young son, possibly fearing legal action from her ex-husband. Yet, my sister persisted in stalking my niece. We frequently received messages from the high school of a suspicious old woman lurking around. My sister, who despite being in her 30s, appeared much older due to her unkempt appearance. Eventually, she was perceived as a threat by other parents and the school's security, and even reported by students. My husband ultimately confronted her, causing a commotion that attracted our neighbors. The community united to chase her away. Since then, she has avoided our neighborhood, deterred by locals brandishing brooms and bats. My sister and her husband, with their young child in tow, sought financial help from our parents, revealing that they had been parasitically living off the supposed non-existent child support. This deception, along with her lifestyle funded by child support, led to our parents cutting ties with her and kicking her out. Our mother, meticulous with finances, had kept detailed records of all the assistance provided to my sister and demanded repayment. Answer, apparently, my mother, having been deceived, furiously demanded the return of everything she had been swindled out of. My sister and her husband told us never to show their faces again, or else they'd be forced to repay the swindled money by any means necessary. They never contacted us again, as they had no money to repay. And my sister, still selfish, eventually abandoned her child at a facility, leaving without any words of return. She hopped from job to job, causing problems and getting fired. She stayed married, thinking she couldn't survive otherwise, while her husband, held back by his pride, struggled to find employment. They believed it was better to keep the slightly earning sister than separate. However, expecting her to be a provider was futile. Now, I hear they live on the streets, scavenging for leftovers. Meanwhile, our family, firmly grounded, enjoys. String 2 enjoyable days lie ahead for my niece, who's about to take her college entrance exams. She aspires to study business management abroad and expand her current business. I wholeheartedly support her in these endeavors,